If you don't read a little bit before you go, oh, baby, you're going to be all over the place. I would just say read. Read, read, read. Get the archetype before you sign the lease. And they don't tell you that until you're like $500 in.
Read and call your architect.
Well, yeah, I try not to be self-serving. I feel like she beat it over the head a little earlier, but yeah, definitely go get an architect. You heard Sherika.
That always amazed me. But who am I?
Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to another episode of the DREAM BuildCast. Today, we're going to be unpacking daycares. So super excited to do this. Today, we're here with, as always, Alex Walker, who is from Dream Key Partners, real estate development manager, architectural designer, and also Devon Ellis from Ellis Engineering and Construction Management Services. Jack of all trades, civil, structural, building inspection, construction management. And as always, I'm Nick Robinson from Dream Builders. And we have the pleasure of being here today with one of actually a Dream Builders client and very much so repeat client. She is a guru at daycares, Sherika Lipsey-Muex. And she's has Preschool Academy. That is her company. And she's opened multiple daycares and ran large daycares, smaller daycares. I've never worked with anybody that was so competent on the client side. So definitely see it as a pleasure being here with you all. Well, let's see. First of all, let's do a check-in. How's everybody doing?
Doing great this morning.
Yeah. Okay. 𝗍𝗵𝗲𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍. So I think today what we want to do is more so kind of explore the daycare world through the eyes of an owner-operator. So Sherika, maybe you can give us a better intro than I gave you of yourself, and then like just how you really got into the business of daycares.
Well, it kind of started from being in a home. Being in a home was very easy. Didn't really need much information as far as working with the city or even having to go downtown. So that was really great. It wasn't until after being open for a couple years with a home, and that was my first experience with having to go downtown to get a paper that says I can operate a home. Then a few years later, going into commercial was like the biggest scare of my life, because not only did you have to go down there once, you had to go down there several times. And a lot of times they don't have it all together. It's not necessarily you, it's kind of them. And the biggest part is just waiting for the reviewer to just even say, okay, to move you forward.
Okay. Nope, that makes sense. So when you did your home daycare, was that, how many kids did you have under yours? Because like custodial cares, right? That's like the magic word. How many were you caring for at the time when you're doing it in your home?
So when I started, it was 6 because I didn't have a fence. Once I got a fence in my backyard, I was able to do 8.
Oh, so the fence. So that's a thing, having a fence versus not having a fence?
Yes. So there's 2 different things with the home daycare. There's certified and then there's licensed. Without a fence, you're certified, meaning 6 kids. With a fence, you're licensed, meaning you can add 2 more kids.
Got you. Okay. Do you know if you were technically classified like R3 or R4? Because I know 6 is automatically R4, I believe, as far as the residential. No, Devon?
Yeah, it's a home daycare, so it's still operated primarily under the UDC. So from a building code perspective, it's the UDC that is the operative code.
Okay, I got you. And the UDC being the Uniform Dwelling Code, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so then you're going down to the city multiple times. What were you actually dealing with? Why were you going down there multiple times?
You need an architect.
Got you.
Even for the home daycare, they told you need an architect?
For the home daycare, that was simple. That was very easy. I was open within like 3 months. Simple. Best part. Moving on to commercial, if you don't read a little bit before you go, oh, baby, you're going to be all over the place. So before I got into Midtown, I had a commercial space. So that kind of set me up to be prepared for when I did get to Midtown. I knew what to look for. Previously, before that, I didn't really have an idea of what to look for. But the biggest thing is you need an architect. And they don't tell you that until you're like $500 in. And they're like, oh, yeah, we can't move forward. You need documents because of you're doing more than 30 Ks or the space. And so you get all the way in and then they tell you you need an architect. And finding an architect in Milwaukee, it's really hard. Big companies, they won't take you on because you're small. The smaller guy, they're backed up because they have about 1 million other daycares in line. I ran into you and I was like, great. So getting an architect is the biggest thing. It's the most difficult.
Okay. Got you. I mean, because I know at that point, were you only doing one or were you doing multiple at the same time?
Yeah, when I went over to Midtown, I was doing 2 because I was like, I have an architect. I don't know if he's going to be busy. I'm just going to try to run this together and just see where it goes.
Gotcha.
So it worked out for me, but it doesn't really work out for everyone because, again, the biggest is finding an architect. And then depending on the architect you find and how busy they are, you have to wait for your drawings. So you're not only waiting on the architect, you're also waiting for the city as well, because even once you get those drawings in, you can't just email them over. You have to bring physical paper and they have to be a certain size. And a lot of people don't know that. So if you don't read ahead and try to even figure out what they're looking for from the architect, you're just, again, you're all over the place. You're frustrated. So even with getting the architect papers, the drawings in, you're still waiting. And the plan reviewer can take months. I mean, it can take forever.
Gotcha. Nope, that makes sense. So, Devon, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was about to say, I imagine to compound your problems, when at the time when they tell you need an architect, they give you what's called a rejection because you have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals anyway, right?
Depending on how many kids you want to have in the building, you don't always have to do the Board of Zoning. It depends on where you're located. So for me, I was at I want to say a mid-lay zone, which is at Midtown. So I didn't have to go through Board of Zoning. But at my previous location on the south side of Milwaukee, we did have to go through Board of Zoning, which takes even longer time.
Okay. So then, Alex, what can you speak to as far as the plan review process when it comes to daycares? What exactly are they taking their time doing? What's taking so much time? Obviously, they have a lot of projects, but once they start to review, I mean, why do they want an architect? Like, can you give us that city perspective?
Sure. Why does it take so long? I mean, that's a good question. I mean, sometimes there are a lot of projects going on. And, everything, once it's received, you review things in an order. And it's not a simple task. There's a kind of like first come, first received kind of thing. And so from the city perspective, you work on things in a particular order. And so you may have some big projects in front of it. And those big projects take a lot of time. And so I'll just say when I was doing plan review, I would try to help people out as much as possible. And if there was a small project, sure, let's skip the order. I mean, take me 5 minutes or however long it would take so I could spend more time on those bigger projects. So, I mean, it could just be a preference thing, but no one's ever going to admit that kind of thing. So, but in terms of reviewing and doing the commercial daycare plan review, I mean, the first thing is going to be look at zoning and make sure that the first person who looked at it did the right thing. So that's like the first check. And then the second check comes down to the building code things and just making sure, well, what's around it, making sure it's not, that it's going to be applicable. And if it's most likely when the plan reviewers would see the daycares, it was in a change of use capacity. And so understanding previous uses and how it fits in with the contemplated use are all things that the plan reviewer looks at.
Okay. Nope, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess we're walking down the road. Sherika, what was kind of some of the first, like, as we got into, like, obviously you and I got linked up, came and did the field measurements, right? You were actually kind of fortunate in your location because were those buildings fire sprinkled already?
Yes. And I
Okay.
always tell people that want to open commercial buildings, find a building that has sprinklers. Find a building that already has sprinklers.
I got you.
That's very important. That changes a lot. Especially if you want more than 30 kids. That's one of the things that the plan reviewers will have you look at, along with firewalls, especially if you're next door to another space. They're going to look at firewalls and they're going to look at sprinklers. And depending if you have sprinklers or not, they're going to tell you if you have to do something else or if you're good to go. But one of the other key things is reading up to know what they're looking for ahead of time so that you are aware if you need certain things. So there's also a thing called like a limited use, and there's a permitted use, and then there's basically not applicable at all. So if you have a limited use, more than likely you can't have more than 30 kids. And you don't always need a sprinkler, but it just depends again how many children you're trying to have. But finding a building with a sprinkler is very important, and having those firewalls is very important.
Okay.
So just to be clear, just not to go through things, you have the zoning code, which is the limited uses that you're talking about. And then there's the building code things, which are the firewall things that you're talking about, and the sprinkler items, just to be clear. Sometimes those can get confused, and zoning code, building code are two separate issues that you just want to make sure that you are clear on. Because it could be that one thing qualifies under the zoning code, but will not work in the building code. Or could work in the building code, but may not work in the zoning code.
Yeah. Devon, do you remember how we like simplified that when we did our zoning versus building code? It wasn't like one is like, can you do it? And then the other one was like.
That's correct. So the zoning code provide guidance as to whether you're allowed to do it or not. With a building code, that provides you with guidance on what needs to be provided in order for you to do it.
Okay. So, Sherika, you were kind of in these boxes that were fire sprinkler. There was already 1 hour fire separations in between each space, correct? And so what really were the modifications that were needed in order to make the space like habitable for you at that point then?
I just had to really do a change of use.
Okay.
I already had the sprinklers, so I just had to get that serviced and prove, that it was serviced. And then I did go through a hiccup where they were unsure if the wall between my space and the next building next door, nail salon, was fire rated. So we had to do a little bit of digging for previous architect work documents to prove that that wall was fire related. Other than that, I didn't really run into any issues being at Midtown. And the main reason is because I chose spaces that were already occupied at some point in time.
Okay. And then with the number of children you can have in there, if I'm not mistaken, it could fit more than you wanted to actually have in there, correct?
Yes. So it could fit well over 50, but they put me on a limited use, which meant that I couldn't do more than 30. Contrary to that, a little bit down the line, they realized that there was no, because of the, I want to say, overlay that I'm in, there was technically no limited use for me. It's based on what DCF decides to allow me as far as how many children.
Gotcha. So they were basically saying, hey, we're limiting you because the code limits you. But in actuality, it was just if they could just say so or not.
And the only reason why we were able to find that out is after I opened up the fourth location, which was that Midtown play, they realized on there, they're like, oh, you're in the overlay zone. So on the occupancy, paperwork, they put on there the amount of kids is per DCF because I'm in that overlay zone. So that meant for my other 3, although they capped me at 30, technically they weren't supposed to. They were supposed to allow DCF to tell me how many I could have because I'm in that special overlay zone, which isn't for everyone. If you're not in an overlay zone, then they definitely can cap you at that limited use unless you go to Board of Zoning.
Okay.
I went to Board of Zoning when I wanted to do more than 30 on my original one. And Board of Zoning told me I didn't need to see them.
So that's where.
To me, what it sounds like, because you have to be licensed through the state of Wisconsin, correct?
Yes.
In the state of Wisconsin will come out and they will tell you how many children you can have in the daycare center based off
per
of
the bathrooms.
Right. And so at that point in time, it's not really a zoning thing. You're limited by the state of Wisconsin, not by the city of Milwaukee.
Right. In your case, at least this specific scenario, your limitation was not related to either zoning or building code. It was a licensing issue.
Correct.
And that's the third issue with daycare centers. You have the building code, you have the zoning code, then you have licensing. And all those three things work together to determine your capacity on a space. And so it could be, like you said before, that you could have 100 kids in a spot, but your licensing issue comes up and says, no, you can only have X amount of people, 50, because the licensing board says you can only do that. And so then it becomes for the owner, well, how do I get up to X, Y, Z? And that might be you just have to go through the licensing process and have them tell you what extra things you can do to increase the number of children per the licensing agency.
So what are some of those things?
More bathrooms.
Yes.
So when you're working with the city, they initially tell you what you can have. And then the licensing comes out and then they tell you based on what the city says or what their rules are, what you can have. So you're really listening to about 3 different people trying to figure out what you can and can't have. So the city can tell me, oh, I can have 150. So I'm excited. My licensor is going to come out and say, well, you only have 3 bathrooms. And per 15 children, you have to have an additional toilet and additional sink. So although the city is saying I can have 150, my licensor just told me I got to add 2 more bathrooms if I want to have 150. So what do you do in that instance? You start with what you can, because at this point, it's not a Board of Zoning issue. It's more of a licensing issue. But then even with it being a licensing issue, you have to go back down there because now you got to get permits to add bathrooms, change structures. And then that's a whole nother ball game of money, time, and then finding these qualified workers to do the work, because they're going to need you to pull permits and you can't backdoor it because they're going to come out. The inspectors are going to come and they work with each other.
Okay, I got you. Alex, were you about to say something?
So on the building code thing, on a space, it gives you the capacity. So what the plan examiner is saying, based on what the building code says for the fixtures that are there, you are able to have X amount of students in the space. The licensing has a different set of rules. And so at the end of the day, you kind of have to look at all 3 or whatever, or how many rule books there are. And then you have to adhere to the one that's most stringent, essentially.
So are you basically saying, Alex, sorry to cut you off, I just want to make sure we're saying or thinking the same thing. Are you saying that the International Building Code would be ultimately the dictator, or is there something even above that? Because I'm just looking at this chart right here where it says, adult daycare and child daycare. This is chapter 9 of the International Building Code. And there's like 15, water closets. One closet per 15, occupants, and then 1 lavatory, 1 sink per 15 occupants. And then, now they're requiring a shower or a bathtub. And then there's the whole, and I'm just going to put this on, these are the categories: drinking fountains and then other. So they're basically saying 1 drinking fountain and then 1 service sink. Are we saying that this dictates, or there's yet another entity that has the ability to be more stringent than this?
The building code dictates part of it, the actual building. But then you have to remember, you have this licensing agency. It's also at the state level. Those two and what the licensing agency is looking for could be slightly different than what the building code issue is looking for. And
Gotcha.
so you also have to look at what the licensing requirements are for these spaces.
Okay. Nope, that makes a lot of
So
sense.
if the licensing requires more than in order to get a higher occupancy level or service level in terms of how many students you'll be serving, then you have to adhere to those regulations in order to get to that higher level of service.
Gotcha.
Yes, I think in summary, irrespective of the type of occupancy, you always have to be conforming to the most stringent requirements of all the regulatory agencies involved with your occupancy. So like in the case of daycare, for most part, it would be the licensing people, the zoning code and the building code. And whichever one of those have the most stringent requirement, that's the one you have to follow. So if the building code says, okay, you're okay with one toilet for every 15 occupants, and their licensing people say, we need you to have 2 toilets for every 15 occupants, for example, then that's the one that's going to dictate whether or not you get your stuff. Maybe, Alex, there might be some merit in even further qualifying this, in that we have a few other things here. One of them is the occupancy, because the city would be done at the stage when the building and zoning codes are satisfied, typically. But the fact that you get that occupancy doesn't automatically mean that you get to operate from a state licensing perspective.
Yep, that is correct. You can have the occupancy and you can turn in all your paperwork, because you have to, before you can even turn in your documents to get a license for childcare, you have to have that occupancy. And once all those inspections and everything is done, then you can send that in to DCF. And then they'll come out and they'll look at everything, and then they'll determine if you have a yes or a no. So all of your, like you said, all of your building codes, everything can be great. You can have paid. You can have that green paper that says, approved occupancy, however many numbers. But until the state comes out, they can tell you yes or no. But the biggest part is making sure you have that occupancy first, because that is your first start. Without an occupancy, you can't turn in any paperwork to DCF whatsoever.
Okay. Wow. That sounds like quite the process. But I mean, I guess that is a pretty serious business. You're caring for, children, or if it's an adult daycare, right? You're caring for individuals that need assistance. One thing we haven't talked about. So Sherika, you had the pleasure of having basically one large room with 2 exits front and back, correct? And they were at the exit, at the level of exit discharge, what they say, it's like first floor space, right? And you can exit directly out of the building. If you didn't have fire sprinklers, that would have prevented you from needing to install fire sprinklers, correct?
Yes and no. The fire sprinklers determine the age of children that you want to have in the building. So without having children 2.5 and under, I would have been okay if I didn't have the fire sprinklers. But because I wanted infant, I was not okay without having it. But luckily, the building I chose had it already.
So maybe a slight clarification to that, Sherika. I think you were probably told that because where you wanted the kids to sleep did not have a direct exit to the outside. Because typically, without the fire sprinkler, you're absolutely correct. You're now going to be placed into a I4 occupancy category, which, if are better without the direct exit to the outside. Having kids 2.5 and younger puts you in an I4 category, which then forces you to have the sprinkler. But if you have a doorway, if you have an exit directly to the outside from the space that those younger kids, 2.5 and younger, are sleeping, you are allowed, all other things being equal, meaning, having the right size building, etc., etc. You're allowed to have a child daycare group E without the sprinkler. It's a matter of the configuration of where those kids are located.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting hearing Sherika say it from a owner-operator perspective, though, because if you think about it, they're not going to be thinking about it spatially first. You don't say they're thinking about it operationally, saying, hey, if I don't service this group, I don't deal with these things, right? Which is kind of interesting. It's like, yeah, I totally get it. Like, when you said it like that, I was like, oh, man, that's like a way better way for me to put it in my brain to understand, right? It was like, hey, if I don't have anybody under 30 months, I don't even have to poke this bear, right? As opposed to saying like, hey, if I do have 30 months and under, like Devon is saying, hey, now I can service that group. However, I just need to make sure there's a direct exit to the exterior from that actual room. So not a vestibule, not a, hey, like you can't go through multiple rooms in order to get there. Is like, no, like just like your space, Sherika, like you would actually be totally set up, right, for 30 and under, because it's like front door, open space, right?
But even with that, from my experience, my infant room has a direct door that goes right outside. And then we have that front door. And then we have another back door. So we actually have 3 exit ways out of our building. And I still had to have the sprinklers, although they were already there. So it is true of what you're saying, like if you have that direct door. But again, it doesn't always go the way the black and white says it's going to go. And you really don't know if you don't read it yourself. And I've had the experience of correcting some plan reviewers in a sense through my journey. And they don't like that. Even if you show them that this is what it says, they don't like that. And that can push you back even more. Although, you're just trying to say, I read this. So it doesn't always go the way the black and white says, because again, I have 3 exit doors, one directly in that infant room, and I still had to get those fire sprinklers serviced.
Right. So in that case, my guess is that there was something else, another factor that was driving the need for the sprinklers. In this case of a mall environment, I'm not as familiar with the environment, obviously, as you would be, but it's entirely possible that there is another building code parameter that's driving the sprinkler.
So I think I know what that parameter is, Devon.
Yeah.
That I'm thinking about it. So that other parameter would be this. You had a 1-hour fire separation between you and the adjacent business, correct? Now, if there was not fire sprinklers, I believe that would need to be a 2-hour fire separation. So in order to make the argument that I'm going to keep just a 1-hour 1-hour fire separation, then that has to be because it is fire sprinklers. You see what I'm saying?
That makes sense.
So therefore they were like, hey, you have to you're saying that you're fire sprinklered and this is a 1 hour. Yeah, that's acceptable if it's fire sprinklered. So you got to get those fire sprinklers serviced. I think that's maybe how that kind of factored in. Alex, he says.
Yes, an either or situation. Either you have a 2-hour separation, in which case you do not need to have the fire sprinklers, or you have the fire sprinklers, or you have the 1-hour separation and the sprinklers in order to allow you to have the reduced firewall separation. So the combination of the fire sprinkler and the 1-hour wall meets the 2-hour scenario, or you have to have the 2-hour scenario. So all those things go into the situation for the building code, essentially. Or it could be something like you can be in a big field and just have a single building and you don't have any other buildings around you. You won't have to have fire sprinklers because your fire risk is low. If you are a single occupant building in the middle of a parking lot, you won't have to have the fire requirements as if you were in a retail space with lots of other businesses around you. So that fire separation does make is a big difference.
Where were you guys when we were doing this the first time? No, I was kidding.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on that that 1 hour firewall trying to make sure it was there.
How did you actually ended up getting to figure that out? How did you guys bust a hole in the wall? What did you do?
So we end up finding the drawings, and then we went to another building and they looked at the installation that was inside of there. And I had to take pictures. I had to send it in to Plan Reviewer. And then we had to wait for her to get back. And she was like, okay, great. And so we were able to move on after a lot of digging.
I got you. So was that the end all be all once all that was kind of approved on the plan review side? Was that kind of your segue into operation then?
Yes. Once you get through the plan reviewing, it goes pretty quickly if you have all your ducks in a row. At the beginning, when I first started with the 2 locations, they were short on inspectors as far as electrical inspections. So the commercial inspector, pretty easy. Plumbing, easy. I didn't have an elevator, so I didn't have to do that. It didn't have a boiler, so there's no need for that. The biggest one was the electrical inspector. There was one guy, and he was kind of working everywhere. Although they have them divided up throughout the state, you pretty much have one guy taking over one side of the town. And daycares are really popular thing right now. So everyone's trying to get in and, get their stuff looked at. But once you get through the inspections, it flows pretty well. It's just getting those inspections. And one of the biggest things that I learned before coming to Midtown is do it the right way the first time.
Okay.
Cut no corners. They're going to know. They're going to find out that sink was not just there because it was a clothing store. So trust me, they know that the clothing store didn't just have a sink in this back hallway randomly. So just do it the right way because they're going to make you take all that stuff down. They're going to make you go through a whole nother process. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to make you wait till they go through their other customers or their other clients before they come back to you. And they're going to tell the other inspectors, hey, this person put in a sink, didn't have someone licensed to do it. So when you're going in to check the electric or when you're going in to check the plumbing, make sure you look at everything because I already went and found out this person had someone on their table do it. So getting the inspections is important, but it's pretty simple once you get through it. But again, do it the right way or you'll start all over and you'll be upset with yourself.
That's really good advice. Because a lot of times we do see, like you said, people just trying to get things done, not going through the proper processes. And then, like you're saying, ultimately making their life a lot harder because at the end of the day, it still needs to go through the proper channels to be approved in order for them to actually get actual occupancy of their daycare. This obviously goes across the board for lots of projects, but especially daycares. If there's one they're not going to let you slide on, is that one, correct?
Not at all. I learned to just go through the proper way because that final inspection is going to be the construction and it's going to be the electrical inspector. And they're going to come out together and they're going to check those outlets. They're going to check everything. And if there is I don't know what you call it, but the plate that goes over the outlet, if you don't have one of those plates over the outlet, you're not getting passed. And they're going to tell you have to get an electrical, someone that works in the electrical field that can pull a permit just to come out and put a plate over your electric socket. I think it's crazy, honestly, because you look at it, it's just, putting one of those little, cream plates over. But they will make you, get an electrical person. Yes. They'll make you get someone that's licensed that can pull a permit to put that plate on there.
Wow.
So you have to be very diligent in what you're doing and making sure that you're doing everything the correct way, because they're not going to joke around with you when they come up. They're checking all those outlets. They're checking the plumbing. They're checking everything, and they're going to work with each other. So the best bet is really do it the right way the first time.
Okay. Awesome. That's great words of wisdom. Maybe we should just go quick round table. Alice, you start. Give me some words of wisdom before you head out.
Look for a space that's been a previous daycare center.
Look, that's one. Okay. I like that. Devon, what you got?
Yeah, if you can't find a space that used to be a daycare center, look for one that was probably used for something closer to hospital or something like that. I mean, granted, not a clinic, or spaces that are, firstly, have been used for commercial purposes. Secondly, if they have sprinklers, that is preferably, because that your limitations are reduced. And again, like Sherika said, do as much due diligence as possible before.
Okay. Nope. Awesome. I always tell anybody that calls me about a daycare straight face, I say, hey, do you have an accessible entry? Do you have a direct exit to the exterior? And figure out who's next to you. That's, in my mind, the biggest things. Because most buildings aren't fire sprinkler, so this is big going. Make your life easy by having that direct exit, having that accessible entry. And then obviously another thing will be the bathrooms. Bathrooms are a big thing. So, yeah. So I would say that would be my words of wisdom. And then Sherika, you have some closing thoughts?
I would just say read. Read as much as you can before going into a lease, getting a building, because if you sign that lease and the city tells you can't do a daycare, you're paying that landlord. So read first. Read first. That was that. Read.
Okay, that's going to be a real. That's going to be a real. Absolutely.
Sorry, Nick, I'm surprised you didn't add that. You read and call your architect.
Well, yeah, I try not to be self-serving. I feel like she beat it over the head a little earlier, but yeah, definitely go get an architect. You heard Sherika. You heard the lady. She said go get an architect, because at the end of the day, we just need to work together to make sure everything is all cool and copacetic, right?
Get the architect before you sign the lease.
There we go. Y'all heard it. You heard it here first. Architect, then lease, not lease, then architect, and then try to make magic, right?
That always amazed me. But who am I?
No, I got you. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. Sherika, has been an absolute pleasure having you on here, all your wealth of knowledge. Literally, if there's anything we can ever do, I mean, Alex is here, Devon's here. I can get you their contact information. Just feel free to reach out to us as you kind of pursue your future endeavors. But until next time, Alex and Devon, I always appreciate you two coming on here and just providing your wealth of knowledge and perspective on things. So, yeah, let's we'll keep the ball rolling. And until next time, everyone have a blessed day and week.